I was someone who lived my life according to what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I definitely was a people pleaser. I was the person that everybody came to fix things, voice their problems. I was done. I can remember one time sitting in my apartment, like at the kitchen, and just thinking to myself, like, it can't just be this. This cannot be life. Briefly say, for those people that are not familiar with QHHT, the long name of it is Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And what it does is it couples past life regression with connection to your higher self.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today I have Tara Kiprik with us. She is what is known as a QHHT practitioner. So we're going to talk to her about that today, and also some life experiences through the QHHT work that she's done. And we're going to find out all about her. So thanks so much, Tara, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
I'm going to ask it and open this this episode the same way I normally would with anyone I talk to. And there, if you look at where your defining moment in your life was around this subject, around the QHHT type stuff, if you think of who Tara was before that, so little Tara up till that point, what kind of person were you, and what was your life like during those times in your life before you were introduced to QHHT?
Yeah. So, okay. Before QHHT, and probably before, so QHHT came to me maybe like a year or so into what I refer to as my spiritual reawakening, right? So before that, I was someone who lived my life according to what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I definitely was a people pleaser. I was the person that everybody came to fix things, voice their problems, kind of, I don't want to say dump on, but really, like, I was the sounding board, right, for everybody else's stuff. I worked in corporate environments. I managed veterinary hospitals. So I, again, was just the person that everybody came to. And before the awakening, like, I was just done. Like, I was done. I can remember one time sitting in my apartment, like at the kitchen, and just thinking to myself, like, it can't just be this. This cannot be life, right? You just on the hamster wheel, you go to work, you come home, you make dinner, you go to work, like it was I, just like it was almost devastating to think that this was going to be the rest of my life. And I just really couldn't take it. I couldn't take it at all. And it actually started with a surgery. So I was at work and I got like a very tiny hernia.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be put under anesthesia for them to fix it. And when I woke up from the anesthesia and I was like recovering at home, it was like I could hear my soul speaking to me. And I don't know how to explain it any other way than, like, I just knew that I had not been listening to her, and
Mm-hmm.
I had not been honoring myself. And it really just started with like one thing after another, finding people on YouTube. I listened, I don't know if anyone's familiar with um, he's like an ex-monk. His name is Don DePondy or Don DePani or something like that. But he talks about like energy accounting and, being present and all these kinds of things. And it just so I'm going to say, like, the surgery was the kind of breaking point, right? It kind of broke me free from that just mundane hamster wheel of life. And then it really opened my eyes up listening to all these people. I've read the book Conversations with God.
Oh yeah, great book.
Oh, right. I
Yeah.
mean, and the funny thing about that book, very quickly, so my mom gave me that book when I was 16 years old. And I was like, I don't want to read this. We were never like religious, and I was always into like tarot cards and candles and whatnot. And she gave me the book at 16 and I was like, "Ah, Conversations with God, I don't think so."
Right,
But
right.
I never got rid of it. It sat on my shelf for literally 20 years. 36 years old, I had that surgery. And as I was laying in bed recovering, I was like, you know what? I'm going to read that book. And I read that book and it like shattered my reality in the best possible way.
Right,
Right? Like,
right.
and it just, I mean, I want to say maybe one of the biggest things I took from that book was like, you are a creator of your own reality and you are the only one responsible for your happiness.
Mm.
And so that, and then I'm sure as everyone, like things just start breaking down, right? Like the way that you see the world starts to change and the way that you see yourself starts to change and the people around you and all this stuff. And then my mom, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, like
No, you.
my mom, we happen to be on a very similar, like parallel spiritual reawakening kind of thing. Cause my mom was always into like manifestation and all those things when I was a teenager. And so we were both kind of on this parallel journey. And she one day came to me and she said, "You've got to listen to this woman, Dolores Cannon, on YouTube."
Mhm.
Right.
Gotta love Dolores. She's an amazing. She was amazing. Like,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
she's so amazing. And so I started to listen to her, and that's where I discovered QHHT and her practice, of how she came about all this information and
Mm.
all of those things. And that became like, oh my God, it validated what, at least for myself, like I always believed that we had all of this knowledge within us, that we had access to healing, but I just never knew how to find it. Right. And so for her to have this very specific way, like, hey, this is how you find it, it
Mhm.
was just like the light shining, like like hallelujah moment of saying, wow, like I can access this stuff. There is a part of me that is connected to the whole of the universe and I just have to access it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna jump in with that. So you were living the practical life. You
Yes.
know, you were just this is what's really interesting. When you talk about you're naming some big people here. Dolores Cannon, um, Conversations with God. That was his name is
Neil Donald
Neil
Walsh.
Dominant. That's right. When you're talking about these type of people, we're these are individuals who are tapping into a different state of who we are, right? So when we're born and we're these young children, we go to school, we're just kind of learning all the practicalities of life. Like even in the
Yeah.
education systems and everything, it's like, oh, here's the different jobs. You can be a firefighter or you can be a nurse or you can, and it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just,
Right.
and those things are necessary. But what's happening is we're only tapping into one piece of who we are. And we're doing that all the way up into our adolescence, into past our teen years, into our early adulthood. And we become an adult and we get these jobs. And then you come home a couple months into it and you go, what am I doing? Like what? It almost feels like you've been set into an auto mode and you're just automatically going through it. Some people wake up in their 20s, some people wake up in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It just depends when that moment you go, what? Right?
Oh yeah.
I think the beautiful thing about podcasts and the beautiful thing about people tuning in is that it can maybe bring a question to their mind of what am I doing? And there's nothing wrong with what you have been doing and who you are, but it's good to always be asking questions. I'm really big on that. Like just keep asking questions. Sounds like that's what you were going through. And next thing you know, you're looking into Dolores and yeah, she was amazing. I remember when I first tapped in or found her stuff. At first I was really skeptical. I was like, what is this? This is craziness. Some of the stuff she'd come out with. But then as she started talking about the different waves of people coming in and the information she was getting from all these people. It's like, I kind of feel like one of those people. I feel like that makes sense. It's like that she's talking about me. It was really bizarre. So I
That's
totally
cool.
I can totally resonate with that. So let's move into what happened with this QHH stuff. So QHHT, sorry. So you are introduced to Dolores. What was the next step? What did you do? Did you have your own experience? And if you want to just jump right in with that, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did have my own session. So it was probably maybe like a year after this whole thing kind of started, right? I don't remember where in that year I found her, but I was having, so I had had eczema for my whole life. A patch here, a patch there, like nothing. I mean, there were times that it was, I don't want to say debilitating, but it was pretty bad at times throughout my life. But it was nothing that I ever really like worried about. And then all of a sudden, it just started to kind of break out all over my entire body. And I had, my whole life I had gone to doctors, I had gone to dermatologists, I had had antibiotics, had steroids, done all these things. And it wasn't really doing anything. Like I was now having this crazy outbreak all over my body. And I was like, what is going on?
Mm,
And I've always believed that the body can heal itself. And I always believed that the eczema was kind of trying to speak to me,
mm,
but I didn't really know what it meant. There was a time I thought that it was, oh, because I'm not on my path, like I'm not living my full potential. Maybe I'm doing this or that. But nothing ever really like felt like, oh, this is it. And so I had been thinking like, I'm going to go for a QHHT session. There were some other things I wanted to address, some questions I had, like, what is my purpose? What am I meant to be doing here? Um, I was actually on medication for depression, anxiety, things like that. And I wanted to come off of those. And so I was like, I'm going to go for a QHHT session. Like, this is going to be my thing, right? Like, I believed that this was what I needed to be able to turn the lens inward, get the answers, get the healing that I needed from myself. Because until that point, I had been one of those people that always sought outside of myself, right? Always asked for the opinions of family, friends, coworkers, doctors. It was like I couldn't make a decision without finding out all the other opinions and getting all the advice from all the other people.
mm,
And I didn't want to do that anymore. Like this whole spiritual reawakening really was teaching me to go within to find the answers. So I went and I had my own QHHT session, and it changed my life more than I could ever have imagined.
mm. Wow.
It was probably one of the most difficult things like what came after it was some of the most difficult times I've ever had in my life.
Mm,
And but it was that life changing because it's, when everything changes, everything seems to be falling apart.
mhm.
It's like breaking it down so that you can then rebuild. And yeah, I mean,
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
yeah.
it says a lot. I mean, I'm really interested now to even hear more because it seems like whatever the experience was, um, catapulted you into healing. And if, it's like you always hear that, people always say, I don't like change. A lot of people say that. I don't think anybody really loves change. I think some of us are more spontaneous than others. Some of us like to change it up a little bit. But humans in general, I think, are routine. I think a lot of us have a routine of about us. If we have to go through some kind of massive changes in our life, it can seem almost like chaotic because now we have to really dig deep and make big decisions and all these things. Whereas when you're in a routine, you're just doing your day to day. Everything's just the same. So it's easy. It's
Yeah.
easy. So difficulty comes when you have to actually make big changes. And I can attest to that. When you make big changes, you can go through um, a lot of hardships. And for anyone listening in, if you're going through changes, I understand it. It's difficult. I guess the real thing is maybe there's ways you can get through those changes a little more easier, a little quicker, instead of feeling like it's so difficult and holding on to the, when changes happen, we got to get in our heads a lot. So I'm curious to ask you, what, maybe you could bring us through a little bit of what happened in the QHHT session with you, if you're comfortable,
Yeah.
whatever you're comfortable sharing, and let us know why that session affected you so much after and what changes you need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just very briefly say, for those people that are not familiar with QHHT, the long name of it is Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And what it does is it couples past life regression with connection to your higher self. Because the past lives, like it just like the way we live now, right? The things that have happened to us before are affecting us, whether it's energetically, physically, whatever it is. And so visiting those past lives, we can uncover and understand why our life is the way it is now. And then when we connect to the higher self, that's where we have access to that universal knowledge, to the instantaneous healing. So that's like an overview of what happens in a typical session. So for me, I went in, and like I said, my main concern was addressing this eczema and really any kind of like limiting things that were holding me back, whether they were like energetic blockages, limiting beliefs, whatever it was. And so I first, the first thing I experienced was a past life of myself as what I would describe as like a Middle Eastern man that was lost in the desert. And I had the understanding that I was some kind of shepherd or something. I had animals, but I had lost them.
Mm.
And I was in the desert looking for them. And what surprised me at the time the most was this emotion that accompanied it, right? So I'm having this visual of myself kind of lost in the desert, and I am feeling this extreme sadness and loss, and I'm crying. Like, just not what I would have expected, right? But so the life progresses, and I just that's the life. Like, I got lost in the desert. I couldn't find the animals, and the next thing I saw, I was laying on the ground, and my skin had been blistered by the sun.
Mm.
And that, what I came to find later, is a very common explanation or reason for having some kind of skin issue, is like being burned in a past life or things like that, which is a whole other story that I could get into, but I'll do my best to stay focused. Um, so yeah, so I saw this past life of that, and then I saw a lot of other things that were a little bit more abstract. I kind of saw some like energetic globes or portals or things. And it was at the time very mysterious to me. I didn't really understand what was going on. Um, but then when we got to the point of the connection with the higher self, where this is where we're going to ask for clearing of the eczema, this is where we're going to ask for clearing of the limiting beliefs and all of those things, there was so much fight. My conscious mind was fighting
Mm.
so hard, like to not let go, right? Like I can remember my practitioner asking questions like, why is she like, can you heal her now? And I remember saying, like, I hear something saying, if she lets it go, does she really want to be healed? And
Mm.
it was like, and I'm hearing these things, and I'm again like in tears, thinking like, why would I possibly want to hold on to this?
Right. That's what I was thinking. I mean,
Right.
we're all going through this, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, and so I could feel it in my body, like a weird back and forth, like, and I don't remember specifically now, but it was almost like my conscious mind was on my whatever, my right side, and my unconscious or higher self was on the left side, and I could feel them like growing and shrinking, and it was like this weird push and pull, and oh my God, it was just so insane feeling, like you feel insane, and you you really kind of, you're like, what is happening?
Mhm.
Um, and God bless my practitioner. She did such a good job. I was such a tough client. I really like I was rough. I was definitely rough. Um, but so there's all this back and forth, this fighting of like, will she let it go? Will she not let it go? Does she want to be healed? Does she not want to be healed? There was even a time that my practitioner said, like, well, if not now in this moment, when? And the thing that I heard repeating was like, if not now, never, if not now, never. And that
Mm.
scared the shit out of me.
Right. It's this or nothing. It's right now or not at all. Right.
Right. And but I knew that like that wasn't me talking, right? It was it wasn't me, it wasn't my higher self, it was some other part of me. And
Mm.
who knows really what part it was. We eventually kind of figured out, and she referred to it as an entity. I don't really like that term. I feel more of it was like an emotion, or like like a physical manifestation of an emotion.
Mm.
um and it, like, I could feel it as I was laying there, like I could feel it resting in my right elbow. And she just said to me, she was like, well, what do you need to get rid of it? And I said, I need to cut it out. And she's like, okay, what would you use? And I said, a scalpel. And like, I energetically cut this thing out of my elbow.
Wow.
And then it just like released. And, I mean, I don't know, you feel it, like you feel different. You can feel that there was something there before and it wasn't there anymore.
Wow. This is fascinating. I'm just gonna say, like, for anyone listening in, because we all have our ailments and things. I'm included in, I'm not gonna make this session about me, that's for sure. Otherwise, the podcast episode turns into a QHHT session for myself. Maybe I should do that and just put that live. That'd be really fun.
That
Put
would
that
be
as, yeah.
awesome.
But I think we all have our ailments. So to hear somebody going in to look after an ailment you have, whether it's skin conditions, whatever it might be, and to hear that you're having this battle between your conscious, it sounds like you're having a battle between the conscious and unconscious mind. And it really is something that the mind body thing really, I believe highly in the fact that we have like ourselves, but we have this unconscious part of us that doesn't mature the same way or something. It's the only way I can look at it. Um, or it doesn't grow at the same way our conscious mind is. So they're kind of like sometimes can be off balance. So you're having this fight, it sounds like. And again, I'm just talking from what I'm picking up on, but
Yeah.
you're having this argument between your conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And then to say that you cut the energy, it's almost like you cut out the energy wound that you were carrying. And that's incredible. I personally have done past life regression, and it was really fascinating. But that's all it was. It was just past life regression. It was three different past lives I had, which was really crazy. Um,
Hmm.
but so it sounds like you went into this, you had this past life regression, but then you went to other almost energetic realms of things that you were going through, and then you dug into this. So in QHHT, just to touch on this quickly with Dolores Cannon, like she over all the years, she was taking in knowledge from different people's experiences, right? And that's why she dug into. If you want to hear, if anyone doesn't know who Dolores Cannon, and you want to really just have a night of making some popcorn and hearing who we truly are, I would do that because she goes really far out there. But it's
Yeah.
because she has so many years of talking to people and hearing similar things, and then she started kind of gathering almost like a researcher, right? And
Yes.
so it's fascinating. And I'm sure if this is the type of work you're doing, you're going to start seeing that over your life. And so you do this session. What was the outcome of the QHHT session that you had the first time?
Yeah. So I'll also just very briefly say while I was in the session, the practitioner was very like adamant. So, right. So there's this fight back and forth, and the
Mhm.
practitioner was very adamant that she wanted whatever negative entities, limiting beliefs, whatever blockages I was carrying, she like banished them. And when she did that, I could feel energy coursing through my body. Like it felt like a lightning storm was going off inside my body. And she said, I didn't even move. Like it wasn't like I was physically trembling or anything, but I felt like I was. I felt like I was
Mhm.
like having a seizure. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
there was nothing visually going on. Um, so yes, okay. So I then and so then everything calms down and whatever. And we ask more questions. Okay, fine. I wake up and I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Right. Right.
It was the first any kind of healing anything I had ever had. And I felt good, but I was pretty confused. Like I really didn't know what was going to happen after the session.
Mhm.
So I actually woke up the next day. I was supposed to go to work, and I had what I now would call like a healing crisis. So sometimes when we do healing, you're really clearing so much that it like purges from the body, but it has to physically purge.
Mm.
So there's a lot of emotions, right? You feel tired, irritated, crying, like all these things. And that's what happened. Like the next day could not stop crying. I could not stop crying. I didn't know what was happening. I was like, and I actually thought that something was wrong. I
Mm.
I was not prepared for this kind of feeling afterward. I reached out to my practitioner asking her like what's going on? Am I supposed to be feeling this way? And I never got a response. And I never tried to reach her again. So, whatever. Like maybe just as much my fault as hers. But I never like I sent her an email, I never heard back, and I just kind of like so I was alone in this.
Wow.
Nobody I had ever known did QHHT. I was the one, the whatever you want to call pioneer of like diving into all this weird stuff.
Mm.
And so I just had to kind of navigate on my own. And what happened after the session, I don't remember if it was like immediate or maybe a week or a month or whatever later, the eczema continued to get worse and worse and worse to the point that I thought that this lady like messed me up.
Mm. Okay.
Like
Right.
I was like, oh my God, we opened a door. We didn't close the door. Like I
Right.
didn't know what was going on. But it was so bad that I can remember laying on the couch with like ice packs on my face. It was it so that session was in September of 2020. And by March of 2021, the eczema was so bad that I was having like facial swelling where I had to start going. Yeah, it was horrific. Like
Wow.
I would go to so I started to go to the dermatologist because I refused to go to the dermatologist before that. I was on this very big kick of like health and healing and natural, and I really didn't want to be putting more steroid cream all over my body and all these things. So I protested going to the doctor for a while until I just really couldn't do it anymore.
Mhm.
Which I don't necessarily advise, but that was my journey.
Right.
Right? So it got so bad, and so I went to the doctor, and and then they just start throwing things at me, right? Oh, maybe you're allergic to the sun. Maybe you have this allergy. Maybe you have this. Maybe you have candida. Maybe you have like, and all
Yeah.
these things. So it really propelled me I came off all medications. I stopped all supplements. At the time, I had been smoking marijuana. I had been smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, like self-medicating, all the things, you know. So I stopped all of that. I completely changed my diet. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. Like, I mean, they would give me steroid injections because it was so bad. But in between, I was like, I'm going to overcome this. Like, I am determined to figure this out. I don't want to be on injections for the rest of my life, you know, all these things.
Mhm.
And it was like one thing after another, you know, no more supplements, no more medications, no more cigarettes, no more this. Then I changed my entire diet. No more sugar, no more gluten, no more peanuts, no more, like, all those things, right? You go no dairy, like, you
Yeah.
just keep and you just keep trying all the things, and it just kept getting worse. It didn't
Wow.
matter what I did.
So it didn't
Yeah,
matter what you did, what healing option you tried with eating, everything. It just kept progressing.
kept getting worse. Yep. And I found a naturopath, and he would give me like vitamin injection, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Like, it just kept getting worse.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really quite like I said, the hardest thing I had ever had to go through in my life. Like, I
So
mean,
far, most people listening are like, I'm not getting QHHT. I'm staying as far away from that as possible. So I'm interested to hear how this this story gets to the next part, because so far that sounds terrible. So
I know.
you went in to heal, and you came out after that, and it um you went through this chaotic progression of the pain or eczema. I mean, that stuff, that skin issues aren't fun to deal with. There's all kinds of other things that come along with it. So, so what happened next? How did this start to get better?
Yeah.
I'm hoping it did.
So
I think it
yeah,
did.
well, it did, yes, it definitely did. But I will say, like, all of those things that it kind of, you know, quote unquote, forced me to do were things that I wanted.
Okay.
I just never took the steps to do them on my own,
Okay.
right? I wanted to stop smoking. I wanted to stop self-medicating. I wanted to come off of prescription medication. I wanted to eat better. Well, I actually thought that I ate pretty good at the time. But, you know, like, so they were all things that I wanted to have happen. I just kind of never really took the initiative to do them.
Okay.
So I think that's also an important
So the things
thing
that,
to,
yeah, the decisions that you were making after the session were healthy decisions. They were good things to do. Um, but you did it all at once, and
right,
right. And okay,
right.
so you're doing all these things. You're completely changing everything about who you are. And that, so it must have been frustrating though to be doing that and to not see initial, because I think we also are humans are we when we make a change, we want to see results immediately. We want to see like, okay, I did that thing. I stopped smoking. I stopped drinking. I got off the dairy. I did the thing that was probably causing it. Okay, where's the results? So how did you get past that, and when did the real healing start to begin?
Yeah. So I think I got past it out of sheer determination and stubbornness. Like, I think, looking back, I think my belief that the body is meant to be functioning like perfectly
Hmm.
was so strong that I was like, there's no way that this can't happen, right? Like, I mean, because I listened to Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and all of these people that are like talking about how your body is supposed to be functioning perfectly, and it's all these things that you're doing, you know, and I really do feel like it was out of sheer determination that I was like, I'm not giving up, because it's like that knowing, right? I just
Mhm.
knew that if I continue, I didn't care what the doctors told me. When they said, "Oh, diet's not going to change it, but sure, try." I was like, no, the diet is going to change it,
Right.
and
Right.
I just really had this determination and stubbornness to keep going and keep pushing. And what happened, or what I believe happened, was my body was so inflamed from years of overstimulation. I mean, I lived in New York at the time. I lived in Queens.
Mhm.
Like I said, I worked in the veterinary field, like the Wi-Fi, the EMF, like I think, I mean, I have no proof, but like I think that my body was just on complete overdrive of inflammation and from the foods, and I didn't eat organic, like it was just all the things, and I think it just kind of came to this like head, and it just like exploded. And so doing all of those things and maintaining them, right? Because it's like 40 years, or whatever I don't remember how old I was at the time, 38 or something, 38 years of just overstimulation and inflammation and all these things, and not putting myself first and not being aware of my own energy. It's going to take a while to combat that, right? It's going to
Right.
take time to come back to like homeostasis. And I'm going to say the catalyst of the change was that we moved. So we left New York, we moved to South Carolina, where I am now. And now I live like not in the middle of nowhere, but we have like property, and there's a farm across the street, and whatever. So it's a much different environment.
Mm.
And I wish I could say that there was one thing that I did that it was like, oh, it's healed,
Right.
but because it even after that, like it's calmed down a lot to the point where I could function. And I did go back, and like I did put steroid cream on it for, here and there, a week here, it would go away. A month later, a piece would come back. I'd put steroid cream. Like I kind of at that point had given up. Like it was better. It was 80% better. So
Mm.
I was like, I had kind of come to the point of like, well, whatever, if I have to put steroid cream on here and there, like I'm just going to have to live with it, right? This is just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then, and so I will also say with QHHT, especially now as a practitioner, like I encourage clients to listen to their sessions, because it really does help like solidify a lot of healing and understanding of messages and things like that. But I had not listened to my session because I was scared to death.
Right.
If
Yeah.
I'm being completely honest.
Especially with what happened. Yeah. I mean, you're like, I'm gonna just gonna start again.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had not listened to it, maybe like a piece here and there, whatever. But so I've been practicing QHHT for a little over 2 years. And like I said, I tell my clients, you've got to listen to your sessions. You've got to listen to your sessions. And so back in February, I was like, I just started to feel this call like, Tara, you've got to listen to your session again. You tell people you've got to listen to your session again. And I did. So I did.
Hmm.
And I kid you not, like I had an entire another healing thing happen. Like I was crying, I was shaking, like I was just, it was like I was experiencing it all over again.
Wow.
And I'm not gonna lie, like I had another crazy eczema outbreak. I know. I'm like,
Wow.
sometimes I'm like, I'm just a glutton for
Yeah.
punishment.
Yeah. This is great. People are coming on, probably watching this show, being like, I want to do some QHHT. And so far, I mean, I'm like, okay.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sure we're gonna
But
get to the real heart and soul of what this did for you and what it does for people.
oh my gosh,
But
yes.
yeah, it's I'm just gonna say this, and then we'll jump right back where you are there. It's kind of the same sense of, I've heard of people doing ayahuasca, and it's usually when they're at their wits' end. They've tried everything, nothing's happening, and they need some kind of healing. And they go do this ayahuasca, and some of them come out with this amazing experience, but some of them say it's one of the most difficult uh, things they've ever dealt with, because the ego goes, and there's all these spiritual experiences they have, and they come out of it, and they come home and they go, what, who am I? Like, some of them changes their entire, they don't want to be in the relationship they're in anymore. They want to leave where they live. They want to, just changes everything. And so that's scary. But you have to ask yourself, how can that shift you that much? Same thing with the QHHT. Instead of being scared of it, maybe maybe there's a real good reason why it exists, because it's going to bring you to become who you truly are. And to become who you truly are, we got to let go of the things that we aren't. And the things that we aren't are the things that are causing us all this distress and stress and pain and suffering and ailments. And that's what I'm getting from what you're saying. So as
Hmm.
much as we have fear around it, um, what I would like to ask you, and maybe you can answer this a little bit after you're explaining what happened next, is if there's a gentler way to do this, other, because it sounds like you're kind of a, you do kind of sound like someone who just kind of goes out and does it the way you're going to do it, and that maybe there's a gentler way people can work with this so that it doesn't do what the same
Yeah.
things that were happening to you. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
So,
Yes. And so I will say, so like I said, I've been practicing about 2.5 years. I've never encountered someone who had an experience like I have.
okay.
So that's, yes,
So
definitely good
disclaimer to
news.
everybody,
Right.
try not to worry too much if you're going to get into some QHHT work. And
Yes.
and it also sounds, I will say, it sounds like, I'm sure that the person that did the work with you was great, but it does sound like they weren't there for you after, and that can be a little difficult too. So I'm wondering, and I got all these questions, but I'm sure that maybe you as a practitioner are maybe there for your clients even after the session, just for that kind of gentle, like, hey, I'm still here with you kind of thing.
Yes.
Um, so,
That's a
and
huge part. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
well, I just don't want to jump too off of what happened next, because I feel like I brought you into another area of what you were explaining. But you had this second bout of eczema, and so what happened next? When did things start to kind of gently come together?
So yeah, I kind of allowed, so this time when that outbreak happened, I allowed it to really just kind of take over my body and my life. And I did, so I then took all the tools that I had been learning and using throughout my kind of reawakening and my spiritual journey. And I dug deep, and I like did deep work onto like, what is this? Like, what is happening to me? Why can't I let it go? Where does it come from? I mean, I did past life regressions on myself. I did quantum healings on myself. Like, I did all
Mhm.
kinds of things. And what I realized was, when I covered up the eczema with steroids, I didn't grow from it.
Mm.
And when I allowed it to, kind of do its thing, is when I really learned what it was trying to teach me.
Wow.
And so, yeah, like ultimately, for me, the eczema was about separation. And I realized that throughout my life, that has been a theme. Separation from whatever, my dad. You're a baby, you don't really understand that, like, your dad is at work for 12, 14 hours a day, like trying to support your family. You feel abandoned, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So abandonment issues, right? Yeah.
right, abandonment, yep, separation from, oh gosh, I mean, at little things. I changed schools when I was like in kindergarten to go to first grade. Like, I changed schools, and that was a whole separation kind of conflict that I had, and
Mhm.
that one experience shaped most of my adolescent experiences. you know, everything, feeling separate from myself, feeling separated from the divine or God, or, you know, like it just was this theme that I uncovered throughout my life. And once I was able to really understand that, that's when the eczema, like, now, so that was February of this year. What are we in August? And it's like 95% gone. Like I get
Wow.
maybe a little bit itchy if I eat too much gluten or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and, but so, you know, I wish I could say there was one thing that healed it or that
Hmm.
I changed or whatever, but like I said, that session, the snowball effect that it had for the last 4 years of my life. I mean, and I'm a practitioner now. Like, you
Hmm.
know, as difficult and as insane as my life had become, I knew that it was from that first session, and I knew the power that it could have, and I knew how much it could really change your life for the better. I mean, like I said, it wasn't fun,
Right.
but it put me on the path that I desperately wanted to be on.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So the QHHT kind of brought you into a healing journey, essentially,
Mhm,
but you were tapping into a part of you you'd never tapped into, which would be
mhm.
your unconscious mind. You could call it your spiritual self. You could call it, I mean, if we're talking about past life regression, this gets pretty deep, right?
Right.
So it could be past life wounds, could be all kinds of things. But you're dealing with that, and then you're coming back, and then it seems like a lot of the things I was writing down is that you're having a massive stress response constantly to things that you
Mhm,
hadn't really dealt with. Where I was following your story very well. Where I would want to ask a question would be for anyone out there that's going through this, or if they start working with a QHHT practitioner or any kind of mind body work or spiritual work, where they're trying to heal themselves because they know there's deep trauma or deep issues going on. How did you come to the conclusion, and this might be a hard question to answer,
yeah.
that it was around, because you said you had like the skin stuff, right? And how did you realize that it had to do with separation, abandonment, and all these things? Like, where did that come from? Because someone might be sitting there thinking, okay, this sounds great, but how do I even know what part of my like brain or my unconscious mind is, well, like, how did you start communicating better? Like, what kind of work were you said you started doing deep work. That's kind of the way you said it, but what do
Yes.
you mean by that?
Yeah. So I learned a practice. It's called Soul Speak. It was developed by Dolores's daughter, Julia. And it's like a way to turn your attention inward and speak with your body. So just like you would speak with your unconscious mind or your higher self, like your body can communicate with you as well. So it's and I mean, and so I did things like that, but I also am like a seeker of information, right? So I've read Louise Hay books on healing your body and what the body says to you. I did a deep dive into something called German New Medicine, which I feel like not a lot of people are aware of, but it's almost like this scientific, not almost, no, it is very scientific. It deals with like CAT scans of your brain and things like that, but it bridges the gap between the science and the spirituality. So like how Louise Hay will say, you know, oh, a pain in your right shoulder means you're carrying a weight from somebody else or whatever. This
Mm,
actually like backs that all up with science.
wow.
So yeah, so I mean, I have been, like you said, on this healing journey for myself and helping others for 4 years. And I've never stopped looking, like, and I've
Right.
never stopped digging. So it's I've used hypnosis on myself a lot of meditation, a lot of visualization, like to go in and kind of uncover these wounds that were there. Um, yeah, like all the tools that are available, I was like, give it to me.
Right. And going back, it was the QHHT thing that actually just catapulted this. You came out of it. Well, and on top of the surgery you had, that was kind of like the
Yes,
initial like, I gotta change something because why is this happening?
right.
Some people might be like, oh, well, things happen, you got to have surgery. But the more I talk to people who are having NDEs and stuff, we have things that happen in our life that are trying to get our attention. So it's good to always pay attention to why things are coming up. The soul speak you talked about sounds very similar to something I heard called journal speak, I believe it's called, where it's the mind body connection. Where I don't know if it's exactly the same, but in this journal speak, I think that's what it was called. It's when you have this dialogue with yourself. So instead of journaling, you just say everything that you truly feel, and you have to be okay with it. It can be some really ugly stuff, like swearing, just talking about the things you're unhappy with and saying these things because we're holding all this inside of us, and that affects the body. Now, that's in this incarnation, in this life. It also sounds though like QHHT can dig into past life things and traumas that we might be bringing in, and it's not even part of this. And we're just kind of digging into our, whatever we call it, our soul memory, cell memory. So this gets pretty deep. So uh, it sounds like this really changed your life. What I would ask you is, if you're now practicing in QHHT, what kind of things do you do different with your clients? Because I think your experience is beautiful in the sense that now you're working in that, and you can take your experience and help others so they don't go through it quite as dramatically or as harsh as you did. So what kind of things do you do with your clients when you're working with them?
Yeah. So a lot of what I do differently is I seek understanding in the session, right? So instead of just like demanding that things change, I seek to like get to the core of like, why won't you let it go? What's happening that, you know what I mean? Like, instead of just being like, leave the body now.
Right, right.
It's because once we understand, it automatically starts to change and it automatically starts to leave.
Mm.
But when you don't have that core understanding, that's when it can be like, what is going on?
Which you didn't have. You came back without the understanding. Sorry to cut you off there, but you came back,
Yeah,
didn't have the understanding, so you had to like really go through the birth pains of figuring out what that was all about. So you bring people
exactly.
through it during the session.
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I always say like I dig deep in these sessions. I don't accept conscious level answers. I don't
Mm.
accept like I am all about getting to the core of these issues so that they can be released gently, easily, and without so much turmoil in your everyday life. That's not saying that people don't experience like dramatic changes,
Right.
but I always set the intention for them to be easy,
Mm.
gentle, as gentle as possible. But I also really believe that you're going to get exactly what you can handle.
Mhm.
And I believe I got it. I mean, I handled it not well all the time, I mean, but I did. And like I said, it propelled me so far so fast that it kind of, it's almost like I feel like it couldn't have gone any other way. It
Right. Yeah. What I find wild about your story a little bit is that you then started looking at working in this field, but you were doing that still during your healing journey, right? It sounds like you were
Mhm.
still, you just weren't 100%, or you weren't kind of totally done with that. And was that a difficult process to kind of did you have to really learn a lot through that? Because it sounds like you came from a different, you were said you were working in corporate world, you were doing different
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah, I
And
was
now,
managing veterinary hospitals.
oh wow, okay. So then you had to learn, is this a type of hypnosis that you've had to learn and you've had to kind of, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I learned directly from Dolores. Even though she passed away, like they
Mm,
filmed her teaching the classes. So I was able to take it like online and I learned directly from her. And, then
wow.
you just practice and you've got to do, I forget, like 25 sessions before you can be like that's your intern time, right? Like 25
Mhm.
sessions. And then I took level two and I've just been doing it ever since. Like I said, I knew how powerful it was. Like, and we barely scratched the surface of the other things that kind of took place. That those were like the most kind of dramatic things.
Right.
But it changed the way I saw myself. Like, I mean, and the messages even today are still unfolding. I'm still because it was a little cryptic because like I said, I was a tough client. Um, so things were a little cryptic at the time. And so I'm still kind of figuring out what some of those messages actually meant. Um, and it's even still unfolding. And I've had QHHT sessions since then,
Mhm.
and in my opinion, for myself, none of them have been nearly as powerful as that session. Um,
As that first one.
yeah,
Now, do you think that's because of the practitioner itself or just where you were at in your life and what you needed at the time?
both.
Both.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Both.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think without saying it, it kind of opened up your eyes spiritually as well, it seems like, because it changed kind of like your mindset of like who you are, what you're doing. I mean, all that would happen if you go into it, and I don't know what your faith was like before the session. Some people have religious upbringings or spiritual upbringings, things like that. Some of them don't believe in anything. So I can imagine if all of a sudden you have this experience, you're like, what on earth was that? Why did that? How did that happen? And like that's what you mean, how you had other questions coming up. It wasn't just the physical
Right. It
healing, it was
right.
there was more going
Yeah.
on of
Oh,
questions of
for sure.
everything. Yeah.
Yes. And I do think that like so one of the wonderful, I'll call it like side effects of QHHT is that you do get this glimpse into what it feels like, sounds like, whatever to communicate with the part of you that is connected to everything.
Hmm.
And that is I took huge value in that also being able to kind of tap into that divine part of myself or universal part of myself that it's like, oh my God, that's what that sounds like. And I'll spoil it for everyone and say, you hear it all the time. You just don't notice that that is the part of you that is connected. You know what I mean?
Right. No, you know what? You're tapping into something big there because you're right, because you were tapping into a part of the human body, or not even the human body, of the person that you don't see. It's the part of you that's not, it's here, but it's everything. And as I even go through this whole journey of talking to different people and learning a bit more about, I learn about myself every time I do one of these episodes. And that's what I hope for my audience, is that you start to realize there is a dialogue going on at all times, and you become, it's your awareness starts to open up. And you know when we talk about psychics or mediums or people who pick up on things, well, they're just tapping into that place that we don't all tap into. The problem with all these different words, when you say psychic or medium or clairvoyant, it there's woo-woo stuff around it. Like some people get kind of uncomfortable with that, and oh yeah, yeah, I remember growing up and seeing the call now 1-900 or 1-800
Right.
for a reading, and it would be like this person, and like there'd be like crystals everywhere, and it'd be like the weird infomercials, right? So I think
Right.
there's a bit of this mindset that we got to get out of that, because we're a lot bigger than we think we are. and I can sense it, and I can sense it in all the work you do. Did you come out of this, because you're going to be now working with this? How do people get in contact with you, or what kind of, like, where do you usually do the, is this all in person? Do you do this online? Like, what kind of, I'm just curious
Yeah.
if people can get more information on yourself.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, QHHT sessions, according to Dolores and all the teachings I've had, should only ever be done in person. So I'm in South Carolina, so I get people from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, even Tennessee. Um, but I also have developed quite a few different offerings that I do online, just so that it's not geographically constricted, right? So I do past life regression online, quantum healing, the soul speak, the turning the attention inward into the body. And I've also recently started doing, not to be too woo woo, but like I've started doing channeling sessions where I connect to my like high level guide and do sessions with people like that.
Nothing's gonna be woo-woo here. I mean,
Okay.
you go back and listen to a lot of my
I know.
episodes. It's everything's broke wide
It's
open at
all
this
woo woo,
point. In the
right?
beginning, I think I was holding back, and I just at a point now, I'm gone with the wind with
Just
everything.
doing it,
So we're just
right?
going and going. So you do some
Yeah.
sessions online, but they're not really that true QHHT. That's only done in person. I have heard that before. I forget where I heard that. And you said that's in South Carolina, so they can reach out to you.
Yeah.
Do you have a website?
Yeah. Yep. My website is cosmicqhht.com. You can find me like on the official QHHT website, like search for a practitioner, where you could also find practitioners like in your area. They're all over the world. So they are, pretty accessible, especially now. And my advice would be to people to just like talk to them. Or, if they don't have like social media, just get a feel for them, because when you do this kind of work, like you really have to be able to trust the person. So you want to feel good about who you're choosing to do your session.
Mm. Yes, I would think that is with anybody that's doing hypnosis. You want to be feel very
Yeah.
trusted. Um, so I was going to ask you, so there's two, this is a little bit different off, from what we were talking about, but I do sense that as you continue through this work, you're going to find out all kinds of crazy things and fun things about who we are. As Dolores said when she first started, it took her years to get to the point where she was seeing consistencies. And I just think knowing what you're doing now, you're likely going to keep growing and learning more about our true nature, who we are. And I
Absolutely.
don't know what your feelings were around this before, and it's okay. It doesn't really matter. One of the questions I ask a lot of people who've had NDEs, for instance, is if they have any fears around the end of this life. If we have this life, we're going through it, we have all these stresses, we learn, we grow, but then at some point, we're all in line, and it's kind of not, it's not a fun thing to talk about, but we're all in line to go somewhere else or to have something happen at the end of the life. Have you found that working in this, having your own sessions and continuing to work on it, that it's grown your understanding of who we truly are and where we're going after this life? I'm wondering if that has expanded your feelings around the idea of death.
Oh, absolutely. So I used to be one of the people that thinking about death literally made me sick to my stomach. I was so afraid of it. Like the thought of me not being here anymore, I kind of couldn't even really wrap my mind around it. Like I had even taken in college a class called like Perspectives on Death and Dying, trying to kind of, like
Right.
trying to kind of get okay with it. Um, and through this work, yeah, I have had exponential understanding that we are eternal. We are energy. Like this body that we are experiencing now in this moment is temporary, but our soul continues on
Mm.
and changes form and is even now my consciousness is split into 100 different parts, and it's like something you kind of can't even grasp, in this kind of limited view that we have. and that we're all connected. We are all part of God. We are all connected to each other. Like, it's all just reflections of ourselves. I mean, it can get weird, but yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and there's just no coincidence. There's no coincidence to who we come in contact with, who we meet, who we draw to ourselves. We're all learning and sharing and growing, and just, yeah, it's like an infinite web of souls and energy, and like a
Wow.
tapestry is kind of how I see it.
I love that. I think one of the fascinating things and beautiful things about the work you're doing now and what you'll be seeing over time is you're likely going to keep growing yourself because you're going to be tapping into things that we don't always tap into in a day to day. And you're gonna be talking to people and you might have epiphanies. Wow, I've heard that before. And I think that is just amazing. So it's beautiful the work you're doing. So it's really interesting.
Thank
I
you.
I had a feeling that you would answer it in the way you did. I didn't think you were gonna be like, nope, we're just dust. That's it. Done. Like, okay, so everything we just talked about kind of is irrelevant at this point because but I did have to ask the question because
Yeah.
it's something that I've always been curious of, especially people who work with this kind of work with past life and stuff. I did when I had a past life regression, I worked with a guy who great hypnosis, but he wasn't QHHT or anything. He just did past life regression. He did hypnosis and he did a little bit of past life. And
Hmm.
in one of my sessions, I was this beautiful Greek woman from the 15 or 1600s, and it was very intense. And I gave him a name of this person, and I couldn't. Well, after the session, I had left and came home, and I couldn't get that name out of my head. I thought, why did what a weird name? And I could remember the name. And all I did is I went into Mr. Google and I looked it up and I put the name I said and I put female and I put whatever year it was that I had said, and it came up that in Greece, that was one of the most popular female names during this time. And I had
Oh.
no knowledge of Greek anything. So for me to know that, I'm like, where did I? So it bothered me for so long because I'm like, did I get that in a movie? Did I get that? Like, but no, I can't recall it. And anyway, my point was I wrote to him and his response was really interesting. His response was that he said, I love the work I do. And when I hear things like this, it opens up, my thought process because I don't know what all this means. I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't mean I believe in anything that came out of your session. Like he was almost a non-believer, but what he was saying,
Wow.
right? I know. Isn't that fascinating? And
Yeah.
what he said though was getting those type of little pieces of information from his clients were actually almost giving him proof that there's something more going on. So he was probably in his infancy of learning about this stuff at the time,
Mm.
but very science-based type person, but really good at what he did. So I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. I'm like, I would have thought that somebody who's doing this kind of work would have been just completely a believer. And maybe he is now,
Yeah.
but at the time, he
Right.
really appreciated me reaching out and telling him that. I just wanted to share that because I thought that was fascinating. Why do you believe that we come here? What's the purpose of our incarnation here?
So I believe that we come here to experience that we are pieces of God, I'll call it, source, energy, whatever you want to call it. And we come here to experience ourselves as creators. Because it's like, and I think this is kind of important for us to think about all the time. So, like, you can have an idea of who you might think you are, but until you actually experience yourself as such, it's kind of just this like idea, right? Like you can think that you're generous, but until you actually share, it's just an idea. And so I think that it's like that. I think it's like there is this consciousness or creator or something there, and we are kind of like offshoots in all aliens, animals, rocks, whatever, like whatever,
Right.
right? Like not just people. It's and we just come to experience ourselves and to see what's possible.
Mm.
because otherwise you just kind of, there's just this energy sitting up there, like imagining itself doing all these things, but it actually has to do them to kind of have that experience. Does that make sense?
I love that. Yeah, I haven't actually had anyone say that we're just like what I got that is that we're conscious creators. We come here to learn to create ourselves because God, in essence, is creation. So we wanted to come down and experience that ourselves. So we've come down to do that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really fascinating. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing, as we can
Right.
see, because we're constantly creating, and we could be creating either chaos in our life or love, passion, excitement, purpose. So it's really important to pick your poison correctly, because if you go the wrong way, it can become difficult. And you're here to help people kind of get through that. So really
Yeah.
appreciate you being on today. This has been a really amazing conversation. So
Thank you. I hope I didn't like scare anybody.
no,
It's just
yeah,
it's
no, I brought those things up too because I'm listening to you for the first time too, and I'm expressing my thoughts and feelings. I think what can be learned from it is that, you know, you went through your experience, but your experience is now helping you help others
oh yeah.
get through that experience in a more gentler way. So I like how you said earlier to make sure you're choosing someone you trust. If you're doing QHHT, maybe ask the questions before you get into it. Am I alone in this afterwards? You know,
Yeah,
am
absolutely.
right? Because if you
I
feel like you're, being guided and held along the way, it might be a little bit easier.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like I call them impact sessions for like afterward, like to help people integrate or unpack or deal with, whatever comes up in their sessions. Because, yeah, I would have wanted to have that
Right.
for myself.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
also don't think you're scaring anyone. I think you're being truthful because
Yeah.
if you're working in this work, you're not going to be like, yeah, come on in, we'll just have a little talk and you'll go on your life and you'll fix everything. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? They might walk. That's not a healthy way to do that kind of thing. So I
Yep.
think that way that you're doing it is being like, yes, this could be, there could be challenges ahead with this, but nothing that you can't get through. If anything, this is going to bring you to a more healing place. This has been a really great conversation.
Thank you. I
I
enjoyed it.
I always I turn to the audience and say, please continue to like, share, subscribe. We keep growing the Soul Inspired so we can get beautiful souls on, and talk about all kinds of different things. But today we talked about hypnosis, and I mean we went to soul talk and everything. So thank you so much, Tara. Thanks so much for bringing your wisdom on and being part of the Soul Inspired.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
So vision.